Hello, everyone. It's me, Lucian. Hello, hello. Oh, wrong scene. There we go. Hello, everyone. It is I, your favorite and lovable necromancer, Lucian. Hello. So, as you can see by the title, we are going to be finishing up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is the first book in this, I think, six-part series, actually. Like, the book have here has five books in one, but I think there's a sixth book, which I don't have, so I have to look into getting it. But anyway, yeah, hope everyone's doing well. Hope you've all had a good day, yeah? And we will be starting here shortly. Like I said, we're going to be finishing up the first book. And I hope everyone's had a good Tuesday. My Tuesday was good. Had got some decent news in today. So hopefully next week that news comes true. And it'll be good things. So I just had to take a long sip of my water there. Because my throat's been kind of funny here lately. Why is my bitrate doing horrible? I don't know. Anyway, without further ado, y'all probably heard that. A nice meaty thump of the book, and we're going to go ahead and open her up and start reading chapter 21. Let me get on closer to my book, look down at it. On the surface of Magrathea, Arthur wandered about moodily. Ford had thoughtfully left him his copy of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to while away the time with. He pushed a few buttons at random. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a very unevenly edited book and contains many passages that simply seemed to its editors like a good idea at the time. One of these, the one Arthur now came across, supposedly relates the experiences of one Vit Vujigig, a quiet young student at the University of Maximegalon, who pursued a brilliant academic career studying ancient philology, transformational ethics, and the wave harmonic theory of historical perception. Then, after a night of drinking pan-galactic gargle blasters with Zaphod Beeblebrox, became increasingly obsessed with the problem of what had happened to all the ballpoints he'd bought over the past few years. There followed a long period of painstaking research during which he visited all the major centers of ballpoint loss throughout the galaxy and eventually came up with a quaint little theory which caught quite the public imagination at the time. Somewhere in the cosmos, he said, along with all the planets inhabited by humanoids, reptiloids, fishoids, walking treeoids, and super intelligent shades of the color blue. Ah. Hey, Richard. Oh God, I shrunk. Leaning back in my chair made my character go all the way down. Was my OBS crashing? Is my internet crashing? Hold on one second. I gotta refresh my Twitch. Oh, why is my bitrate unstable? Why? Anyway, I think my computer's having connections. Good to know! Let me know if y'all can hear me or if my stream's breaking, please. It's lagging on my end. Oh God, I dropped down to 160p. That might just be my computer though. I don't know. Hope you enjoy the bedtime story, Richard. Oh, I also got two new redeems and an effect that happens when you hydrate me, man. When you make me drink blood. Anyway, back to the book. But you can give me a head pat now. Hey, where was I? Uh, hmm. Also a plant entirely given over to ballpoint life forms. And it was to this plant that unattended ballpoints would make their way, slipping away quietly through wormholes in space to a world where they knew they could enjoy a uniquely ball-pointed lifestyle. Responding to highly ballpoint-oriented stimuli and genuinely leading the ballpoint equivalent of the good life. And as theories go, this was all very fine and pleasant until Vit Vujagig suddenly claimed to have found this planet. and to have worked there for a while, driving a limousine for a family of cheap green retractables, whereupon he was taken away, locked up, wrote a book, and was finally sent into tax exile, which is the usual fate reserved for those who are determined to make fools of themselves in public. When one day an expedition was sent to the spatial coordinates that Vujigig had claimed for this planet, they discovered only a small asteroid inhabited by a solitary old man who claimed repeatedly that nothing was true, though he was later discovered to be lying. There did, however, remain the question of both the mysterious 60,000 Altarian dollars paid yearly into his Francis Vaughan bank account, and of course, Zaphod Beaverbrook's highly profitable second-hand ballpoint business. Arthur read this and put the book down. The robot still sat there, completely inert. Arthur got up and walked to the top of the crater. He walked around the crater. He watched two suns set magnificently over Magrathea. He went back down into the crater. Woke up the rope. He woke up the rope because even a maniacally depressed robot is better to talk to than nobody. Night's falling, he said. Look, robot, the stars are coming out. From the heart of a dark nebula it is possible to see very few stars and only very faintly, but they were there to be seen. The robot obediently looked at them, then looked back. I know, he said. Wretched, isn't it? But that sunset, I've never seen anything like it in my wildest dreams. The two suns! It was like mountains of fire boiling in space. I've seen it, said Marvin. It's rubbish. Well, if I had the one sun at home, persevered Arthur. I came from a planet called Earth, you know. I know, said Marvin. You keep going on about it. It sounds awful. Ah, no. It was a beautiful place. Did it have did it have oceans? Oh yes, said Arthur with a sigh. Great wide rolling blue oceans. Can't bear oceans, said Marvin. Tell me, inquired Arthur, do you get on well with other robots? Hate them, said Marvin. Where are you going? Arthur couldn't bear any more. He had got up again. I think I'll just take another walk, he said. Don't blame you, said Marvin, and counted 597 billion sheep before falling asleep again a second later. Arthur slapped his arms about himself to try and get circulation, a little more enthusiastic about his job. He trudged back up the wall of the crater. Because the atmosphere was so thin, and because there was no moon, nightfall was very rapid and it was by now very dark. Because of this, Arthur practically walked into the old man before he noticed him. Chapter 22. Yeah. He was standing with his back to Arthur, watching the very last glimmers of light sink into blackness behind the horizon. He was tallish, elderly, and dressed in a single long gray robe. When he turned, his face was thin and distinguished, careworn but not unkind, the sort of face you would happily bank with. But he didn't turn yet, not even to react to Arthur's yelp of surprise. Eventually, the last rays of the sun vanished completely, and he turned. His face was still illuminated from somewhere, and when Arthur looked for the source of the light, he saw that a few yards away stood a small craft. Of some kind. A small hovercraft, Arthur guessed. It shed a dim pool of light around it. The man looked at Arthur, sadly it seemed. You choose a cold night to visit our dead planet, he said. Who who are you? Stammered Arthur. The man looked away. Again, a look of sadness seemed to cross his face. My name is not important, he said. He seemed to have something on his mind. Conversation was clearly something he felt he didn't have to rush at. Arthur felt awkward. I, er, you startled me, he said, lamely. The man looked round to him again and slightly raised his eyebrows. Hmm? He said. I said you startled me. Do not be alarmed. I will not harm you. Arthur frowned at him. But you shot at us. There were missiles, he said. The man gazed into the pit of the crater. The slight glow from Marvin's eyes cast very faint red shadows on the huge carcass of the whale. The man chuckled slightly. "An automatic system," he said and gave a small sigh. Ancient computers ranged in the bowels of the planet tick away the dark millennia, and the ages hang heavy on their dusty databanks. I think they take the occasional pot shot to relieve the monotony. He looked gravely at Arthur and said, "I'm a great fan of science, you know." "Oh, really?" said Arthur, who was beginning to find the man's curious, kindly manner disconcerting. "Oh, yes," said the old man, and simply stopped talking again. "Ah," said Arthur. He had an odd feeling of being like a man in the act of adultery who is surprised when a woman's husband wanders into the room, changes his trousers, passes a few idle remarks about the weather, and leaves again. "You seem ill at you seem ill at ease," said the old man, with polite concern. No. Well, yes. Actually, you see, we weren't really expecting to find anybody about, in fact. I sort of gathered that you were all dead or something." "Dead?" said the old man. "Good gracious me, no. We have but slept." "Slept?" said Arthur, incredulously. "Mm. Yes, through the economic recession, you see," said the old man, apparently unconcerned about whether Arthur understood a word he was talking about or not. Arthur had to prompt him again. Er, economic recession? Hmm. Well, you see, 5 million years ago the galactic economy collapsed, and seeing that custom-built planets are something of a luxury commodity, you see. He paused and looked at Arthur. "You know we build planets, do you?" he asked solemnly. "Well, yes," said Arthur. "I sort of gathered." "Fascinating trade," said the old man, with a wistful look came into his eyes. "Doing the coastlines was always my favorite. Used to have endless fun doing the little bits and fords. So anyway," he said, trying to find his thread again, "the recession came and we decided it would save a lot of bother if we just slept through it. So we programmed the computers to revive us when it was all over." The man stifled a very slight yawn and continued. "The computers were indexed linked to the galactic stock market prices, you see, so that we'd all be revived when everybody else had rebuilt the economy enough to afford our rather expensive services." Arthur, a regular Guardian reader, was deeply shocked at this. "That's a pretty unpleasant way to behave, isn't it?" "Is it?" asked the old man mildly. "I'm sorry, I'm a bit out of touch." He pointed down to the crater. "Is that robot yours?" "No," came a thin metallic voice from the crater. "I'm mine." "If you'd call it a robot," muttered Arthur, "it's more of a sort of electronic soaking machine." "Bring it," said the old man. Arthur was quite surprised to hear a note of decision suddenly present in the old man's voice. He called to Marvin, who crawled up the slope making a big show of being lame, which he wasn't. "On second thought," said the old man, "leave it here. You must come with me. Great things are afoot." He turned toward his craft, which, though no apparent signal had been given, now drifted quietly toward them through the dark. Arthur looked down at Marvin, who now made an equally big show of turning around laboriously and trudging off down into the crater again, muttering sour nothings to himself. "Come," called the old man. "Come now, or you will be late." "Late?" said Arthur. "What for?" "What is your name, human?" "Dent. Arthur Dent," said Arthur. "Late as in the late, Dent Arthur Dent," said the old man sternly. "It's a sort of threat, you see." Another wistful look came into his tired old eyes. "I've never been very good at them myself, but I'm told they can be very effective." Arthur blinked at him. "What an extraordinary person," he muttered to himself. "I beg your pardon," said the old man. "Oh, nothing." I'm sorry, said Arthur in embarrassment. All right, where do we go? In my air car, said the old man, motioning Arthur to get into the craft, which had settled silently next to them. We are going deep into the bowels of the planet, where even now our race is being revived from its 5 million-year slumber. Magrathea awakes. Arthur shivered voluntary as he seated himself next to the old man. The strangeness of it, the silent bobbing movement of the craft as it soared into the night sky, quite unsettled him. He looked at the old man, his face illuminated by the dull glow of tiny lights on the instrument panel. "Excuse me," he said to him. "What is your name, by the way?" "My name?" said the old man, and the same distant sadness came into his face again. He paused. "My name," he said, "is Slaughterbartfast." Arthur practically choked. "I beg your pardon," he spluttered. "Slaughterbartfast," repeated the old man quietly. "Slaughterbartfast?" The old man looked at him gravely. I said it wasn't important," he said. The aircar sailed through the night. Chapter 23, yeah? Oh, sorry for that yawn. I had a yawn. Am I still streaming? Is it still showing up and everything? Yes, okay. Just double checking. It is important and popular fact that things are not always what they seem. For instance, on the planet Earth, man had always assumed that he was more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much. The wheel, New York, wars, and so on. Well, all the dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water having a good time. But conversely, the dolphins had always believed that they were far more intelligent than the man for precisely the same reasons. Curiously enough, the dolphins had long known of the impending destruction of the planet Earth and had made many attempts to alert mankind to the danger, but most of their communications were misinterpreted as amusing attempts to punch footballs or whistle for tidbits, so they eventually gave up and left the Earth by their own means shortly before the Vogons arrived. The last ever dolphin message was misinterpreted as a surprisingly sophisticated attempt to do a double backward somersault through a hoop while whistling the Star Spangled Banner. But in fact, the message was this: "So long, and thanks for all the fish." In fact, there was only one species on the planet more intelligent than dolphins, and they spent a lot of their time in behavioral research laboratories running around inside wheels and conducting frighteningly elegant and subtle experimentations on man. The fact that once again, man completely misinterpreted this relationship was entirely according to these creatures' plans. Scary, yeah. Chapter 24. Silently, the aircar coasted through the cold darkness, a single soft glow of light that was utterly alone in the deep, Magrathean night. It sped swiftly. Arthur's companion seemed sunk in his own thoughts, and when Arthur tried on a couple of occasions to engage him in conversations again, he would simply reply by asking if he was comfortable enough, and then left it at that. Arthur tried to gauge the speed at which they were traveling, but the blackness outside was absolute, and he was denied any reference points. The sense of motion was so soft and slight he could almost believe they were hardly moving at all. Then a tiny glow of light appeared in the far distance, and within seconds had grown so much in size that Arthur realized it was traveling toward them at a colossal speed, and he tried to make out what sort of craft it might be. He peered at it, but was unable to discern any clear shape, and suddenly gasped in alarm as the aircar dipped sharply and headed downward in what seemed certain to be a collision course. The relative velocity seemed unbelievable, and Arthur had hardly time to draw breath before it was all over. The next thing he was aware of was an insane silver blur that seemed to surround him. He twisted his head sharply round and saw a small black point dwindling rapidly in the distance behind them. It took him several seconds to realize what had happened. They had plunged into a tunnel in the ground. The colossal speed had been their own, relative to the glow of light, which was a stationary hole in the ground at the mouth of the tunnel. The insane blur of silver was the circular wall of the tunnel down which they were shooting, apparently at several hundred miles an hour. He closed his eyes in terror. After a length of time which he had made no attempt to judge, he sensed a slight substance in the speed, and some while later became aware that they were gradually gliding to a gentle halt. He opened his eyes again, and they were still in the silver tunnel, threading and weaving their way through what appeared to be a crisscross ward of converging tunnels. When they finally stopped, it was in a small chamber of curved steel. Several tunnels also had their termini here, and at the farther end of the chamber, Arthur could see a large circle of dim, irritating light. It was irritating because it played tricks with the eyes. It was impossible to focus on it properly, or tell how near or far it was. Arthur guessed, quite wrongly, that it might be ultraviolet. Slartbaffa bleh. Slartibartfast turned and regarded Arthur with his solemn old eyes. Earthman, he said, we are now deep in the heart of Magrathea. How did you know I was an Earthman? Demanded Arthur. These things will become clear to you, said the old man gently. At least, he added with that slight doubt in his voice, clearer than they are at the moment. He continued, I should warn you that the chamber we are about to pass into does not literally exist within our planet. It is a little too large. We are about to pass through a gateway into a vast tract of hyperspace. It may disturb you. Arthur made nervous noises. Start fast, touched the button, and added not entirely reassuringly, it scares the willies out of me. Hold tight. This car shot forward straight into the circle of light, and suddenly Arthur had a fairly clear idea of what infinity looked like. It wasn't infinity, in fact. Infinity itself looks flat and uninteresting. Looking up into the night sky is looking into infinity. Distance is incomprehensible and therefore meaningless. The chamber into which the air car emerged was anything but infinite. It was just very, very, very big. So big that it gave the impression of infinity far better than infinity itself. Arthur's senses bobbed and spun as traveling at the speed he knew the air car attained, they climbed slowly through the open air, leaving the gateway through which they had passed an invisible pinprick in the shimmering wall behind them. The wall. The wall defied the imaginations, seduced it, and defeated it. The wall was so paralyzingly vast and sheer that its top, bottom, and sides passed away beyond the reach of sight. The mere shock of vertigo could kill a man. The wall appeared perfectly flat. It would take the finest laser measuring equipment to detect that as it climbed, apparently to infinity, as it dropped dizzily away, as it planed out to either side, also curved, it met itself again 13 light seconds away. In other words, the wall formed the inside of a hollow sphere, a sphere over 3 million miles across and flooded with unimaginable light. Okay, hold on, I want to see if I can move some things to get a little more comfy here with my reading. Apologies, shades, my model's going to go wonky. This goes in here. That goes here. One sec. Put this here. Okay. Let me raise that. There we go. Oh, yes, that's better. Kind of. Maybe. Let me zoom that in a little closer. There we go. Hopefully that helps. Welcome, said Slurtfast, as the tiny speck that was the air car, traveling at 3 times the speed of sound, crept imperceptibly forward into mind-boggling space. Welcome, he said, to our factory floor. Just stared about him in kind of wonderful horror. Oop, just got an important message. Give me one sec. Hello, Bean. Welcome in. Yeah. Thanks so much for the alert. I'm always going wonky, but that's I won't exit it out for a second. Ah, I got asked if I wanted food for my lunch tomorrow. Yeah, okay, okay, sweet. Oh yes. Let me respond to that. I know. Oh, I'm slacking. I'm slacking. I'm sorry, Shades. There we go. But Arthur stared about him in a kind of wonderful horror, ranged away before them at distances he could neither judge nor even guess at, were a series of curious suspensions, delicate traceries of metal and light hung about shadowy, spherical shapes that hung in the space. This, said Slutterbot fast, is where we make most of our planets, you see. You mean, said Arthur, trying to form words, you mean you're starting it all up again now? No, no, good heavens, no, exclaimed the old man. No, the galaxy isn't nearly rich enough to support us yet. No, we've been awakened to perform just one extraordinary commission for very special clients from another dimension. It may interest you there in the distance in front of us. Arthur followed the old man's finger till he was able to pick out the floating structure he was pointing out. It was indeed the only one of the many structures that betrayed any sign of activity about it, though this was a subliminal impression than anything one could put one's finger on. At that moment, however, a flash of light arced through the structure and revealed in stark relief the patterns that were formed on the dark sphere within. Patterns that Arthur knew, rough, blobby shapes that were all as familiar to him as the shapes of words, part of the furniture of his mind. For a few seconds he sat in stunned silence as the images rushed around his mind and tried to find somewhere to settle down and make sense. Part of his brain told him that he knew perfectly well what he was looking at and what the shapes represented, while another quite sensibly refused to countenance the idea and abdicated responsibility for any further thinking in that direction. The flash came again, and this time there could be no doubt. That, whispered Arthur. Well, the Earthmark too, in fact, said Slurtebet fast cheerfully. We're making a copy from our original blueprints. There was a pause. Are you trying to tell me, said Arthur slowly and with control, that you originally made the Earth? Oh, yes, said Slurtebet fast. Did you ever go to a place, I think it was called Norway? No, said Arthur. No, I didn't. Pity, said Slutterbit fast. That was one of mine. Won an award, you know. Lovely crinkly edges. I was most upset to hear of its destruction. You were upset? Yes. 5 minutes later, and it wouldn't have mattered so much. It was a quite shocking cock-up. Huh? Said Arthur. The mice were furious. The mice were furious? Oh, yes, said the old man mildly. Yes, well, so I expect with the dogs and cats and duck-billed platypuses, but ah, but they hadn't paid for it, you see, had they? Look, said Arthur, would it save you a lot of time if I just gave up and went mad now? For a while, the air car flew on in awkward silence, and the old man tried patiently to explain. Earthman, the planet you lived on was commissioned, paid for, and run by mice. It was destroyed 5 minutes before the completion of the purpose for which it was built, and we've got to build another one. Only one word was registering with Earther. Mice? He said. Indeed, Earthman. Look, sorry, are we talking about the little white furry things with the cheese fixation and women staying on tables screaming in early 60s sitcoms? Silverfast coughed politely. Earthman, he said, it is sometimes hard to follow your mode of speech. Remember, I have been asleep inside this planet of Magrathir for 5 million years, and know little of these early 60s sitcoms of which you speak. These creatures you call mice, you see, they are not quite as they appear. They are merely the protrusion into our dimension of vastly hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings. The whole business with the cheese and the squeaking is just a front. The old man paused and with a sympathetic frown continued. They've been experimenting on you, I'm afraid. Arthur thought about this for a second, then his face cleared. Ah, no, he said. I see the source of misunderstanding now. No, look, you see what happened was that we used to do experiments on them. They often use behavior research, Pavlov and all that sort of stuff. So what happened was that the mice would be set all sorts of tests, allowing to ring bells, run around mazes, and things, so that the whole nature of the learning process could be examined. From observation of their behavior, we were able to learn all sorts of things about our own. Arthur's voice trailed off. Such subtlety, said Slaughterbutt-Fast. One has to admire it. What? Said Arthur. How better to disguise their real natures and how better to guide your thinking. Suddenly running down a maze the wrong way, eating the wrong bit of cheese, unexpectedly dropping dead of it, myxomatosis. If it's finely calculated, the cumulative effect is enormous. He paused for effect. You see, your friend, they really are particularly clever, hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings. Your planet and people have formed the matrix of an organic computer running a 10 million-year research program. Let me tell you the whole story. It'll take a little time. Time, said Arthur weakly, is not currently one of my problems. Chapter 25. There are, of course, many problems connected with life. Of some are the most popular are why are people born? Why do they die? Why do they want to spend so much of the intervening time wearing digital watches? 1 second, Vivian, I gotta blow my nose. BRB. What the? Apparently VTube Studio crashed on my phone. Good to know. Yeah, that or I accidentally closed out because I on my brain. Won't be the first time. Uh, trying to see if I can get back up. 1 second, Shades. It's being finicky. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. It took forever. Okay, streaming mode on. Is it capturing me? It is capturing me, so that's good to know. Okay. There we go. There we go. Where is... There we go. Sorry about that, Avignon. Oh, great. Things are just being wonky. There we go. Sorry, Avignon. Okay. Many, many millions of years ago, a race of hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings whose physical manifestation in their own pan-dimensional universe is not dissimilar to our own, got so fed up with the constant bickering about the meaning of life, which used to interrupt their favorite pastime of Brockian Ultra Cricket, a curious game which involves suddenly hitting people for no readily apparent reason and then running away, that they decided to sit down and solve their problems once and for all. And to this end, they built themselves a stupendous supercomputer, which was so amazingly intelligent that even before its data banks had been connected up, it had started from I think, therefore I am, and got as far as deducing the existence of right pudding and income tax before anyone managed to turn it off. It was the size of a small city. Its main console was installed in a specially designed executive office, mounted on an enormous executive desk of finest ultra mahogany topped with rich ultra red leather. The dark carpeting was discreetly sumptuous. Exotic pot plants and tastefully engraved prints of the principal computer programmers and their families were deployed liberally about the room, and stately windows looked out upon a tree-lined public square. On the day of the great on-turning, two soberly dressed programmers with briefcases arrived and were shown discreetly into the office. They were aware that this day they would represent their entire race in its greatest moment, but they conducted themselves calmly and quietly as they seated themselves deferentially before the desk, opened their briefcases, and took out their leather-bound notebooks. Their names were Lunkwell and Fook. For a few moments they sat in respectful silence, then after exchanging a quiet glance with Fook, Lunkwell leaned forward and touched a small black panel. The subtlest of hums indicated that the massive computer now was now in total active mode. After a pause, it spoke to them in a voice rich, resonant, and deep. It said, "What is this great task for which I, Deep Thought, the second greatest computer in the universe, time and space, have been called into existence?" Lunkwell and Fook glanced at each other in surprise. "Your task, O computer," began Fook. "No, wait a minute, this isn't right," said Lunkwell, worried. "We directly designed this computer to be the greatest one ever, and we're not making do second best. Deep Thought," he addressed the computer, "are you not, as we designed you to be, the greatest, most powerful computer in all time?" "I described myself as the second greatest," intoned Deep Thought, "and such I am." Another worried look passed between the two programmers. Lunkwell cleared his throat. "There must be some mistake," he said. "Are you not a greater computer than the Milliard Gargantua brain at Maxamegalon, which can count all the atoms in a star in a millisecond?" "The Milliard Gargantua brain," said Deep Thought with unconcealed contempt, "a mere abacus. Mention it not." "And are you not," said Fook, leaning anxiously forward, "a greater analyst than the Googleplex star thinker in the seventh galaxy of light and ingenuity, which can calculate the trajectory of every single dust particle through a 5-week Dangrabad beta sand blizzard?" "A 5-week sand blizzard," said Deep Thought haughtily. "You ask this of me, who have contemplated the very vectors of atoms in the Big Bang itself? Molest me not with this pocket calculator stuff." The two programmers sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Lunkwell leaned forward again. "But are you not," he said, "a more fiendish disputant than the great hyperlobic omnicognate neutron wrangler of the Ciceronicus 12, the magic and indefatigable? Bah! Words. "The great hyperbolic omnicognate neutron wrangler," said Deep Thought, thoroughly rolling the R's. "Well, I can't do that. Could talk all 4 legs off an Arcturian megadonkey, but only I could persuade it to go for a walk afterward." "Then what," asked Fook, "is the problem?" "There is no problem," said Deep Thought with magnificent ringing tones. "I am simply the second greatest computer in the universe of space and time." "But the second," insisted Lunkwell. Why do you keep saying the second? You're surely not thinking of the multi-corticid perspectron Titan Muller, are you? Or the Pondermatic? Or the contemptuous lights flashed across the computer console? I spare not a single unit of thought on those cybernetic simpletons, he boomed. I speak none but the computer that's to come after me. Fook was losing patience. He pushed his notebook aside and muttered, I think this is getting needlessly messianic. You know nothing of future time, pronounced Deep Thought, and yet in my teeming circuitry I can navigate the infinite delta streams of future probability and say that there must one day come a computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, but which it will be my fate eventually to design. Fook sighed heavily and glanced across the Luckwell. Can we get on and ask the question? He said. Luckwell motioned him to wait. Big yawn. What computer is that, this of which you speak? He asked. I will speak of it no further in this present time, said Deep Thought. Now, ask what else of me you will that I may function. Speak. They shrugged at each other. Fook composed himself. Oh, Deep Thought computer, he said, the task we have designed you to perform is this. We want you to tell us. He paused. The answer. The answer, said Deep Thought. The answer to what? Life, urged Fook. The universe, said Lunquill. Everything, they said in chorus. Deep Thought paused for a moment's reflection. Tricky, he said finally. But can you do it? Again, a significant pause. Yes, said Deep Thought. I can do it. There is an answer, said Fook with breathless excitement. A simple answer? added Lunquill. Yes, said Deep Thought. Life, the universe, and everything. There is an answer. But, he added, I'll have to think about it. A sudden commotion destroyed the moment. The door flew open and two angry men, wearing the coarse, faded blue robes and belts of the Crooksworn University, burst into the room, thrusting aside the ineffectual flunky who tried to bar their way. We demand admission, shouted the younger of the two men, elbowing a pretty young secretary in the throat. Come on, shouted the old one. You can't keep us out. He pushed a junior programmer back through the door. We demand that you can't keep us out, bawled the younger one, though he was now firmly inside the room and no further attempts were being made to stop him. Who are you? Said Lunquill, raising angrily from his seat. What do you want? I am Magic Tisse, announced the old one, and I demand that I am Vroomfondel, shouted the young one. Magic Tisse turned on Vroomfondel. It's all right, he explained angrily. You don't need to demand that. All right, bawled Vroomfondel, banging on a nearby desk. I am Vroomfondel, and that is not a demand. That is a solid fact. What we demand is solid facts. No, we don't, exclaimed Magic Beast in irritation. That is precisely what we don't demand. Scarcely pausing for breath, Vroomfondel shouted, We don't demand solid facts. What we demand is a total absence of solid facts. I demand that I may or may not be Vroomfondel. Well, who the devil are you? exclaimed the outraged Fook. We, said Magic These, are philosophers. Though we may not be, said Vroomfondel, waving a warning finger at the programmers. Yes, we are, insisted Magic Thisse. We are quite definitely here as representatives of the Immaculate Union of Philosophers, sages, luminaries, and other thinking persons, and we want this machine off, and we want it off now. What's the problem? Said Lunquill. I'll tell you what the problem is, mate, said Magic Thisse. Demarcation, that's the problem. We demand, yelled Zinfandel, that demarcation may or may not be the problem. You just let the machines get on with the adding up, warned Magic Thisse, and we'll take care of the eternal verities. Thank you very much. We want to check your legal position, you do, mate. Under law, the quest for ultimate truth is quite clearly the inalienable prerogative of your working thinkers. Any bloody machine goes actually finds it, and we're straight of a job, aren't we? I mean, what's the use of our sitting up half the night arguing that there may or may not be a God if this machine only gives goes and gives you his bleeding phone number the next morning. That's right, shared Broomfondo. We demand regularly defined areas of doubt and uncertainty. Suddenly, a stentorian voice boomed across the room. Might I make an observation at this point? Inquired Deep Thought. We'll go on strike, yelled Broomfondo. That's right, agreed Magic Thief. You'll have a national philosopher's strike on your hands. The hum level in the room suddenly increased as several ancillary bass drive units mounted in solidly carved and varnished cabinet speakers around the room cut in to give Deep Thought's voice a little more power. All I wanted to say, bellowed the computer, is that my circuits are now irrevocably committed to calculating the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. He paused and satisfied himself that he now had everyone's attention before continuing more quietly, but the program will take me a little while to run. Foot glanced patiently at his watch. How long? He said. 7.5 million years, said Deep Thought. Longwell and Fook blinked at each other. 7.5 million years, they cried in chorus. Yes, declaimed Deep Thought. I said I'd have to think about it, didn't I? And it occurs to me that running a program like this is bound to create an enormous amount of popular publicity for the whole area of philosophy in general. Everyone's going to have their own theories about what answer I'm eventually going to come up with. And who better to capitalize on that media market than you yourselves? So long as you can keep disagreeing with each other violently enough and maligning each other in the popular press, and so long as you have clever agents, you can keep yourselves on the gravy train for life. How does that sound? The two philosophers gaped at him. Bloody hell, said Magic Caesar. Now that is what I call thinking. Here, Rumfundo, why do we never think of anything like that? Don't know, said Rumfundo in an odd whisper. Think our brains must be too highly trained, Magic Thief. So saying, they turned on their heels and walked out the door and into a lifestyle beyond their wildest dreams. I gotta blow my nose again. Gosh darn it. Arr. BRB. Black shade. Sorry about that. They said I had to blow my nose. It was bugging me, yeah. Anyway, let me grab the book. Trying to find my chapter now. Here we go. So I thought I was going to finish this book by the night, but I don't think I am. Crap. Chapter 26. Yes, very solitary, said Arthur after Starfest had relayed the salient points of the story to him. But I don't understand. What all this has got to do with the Earth and mice and things? That is but the first half of the story, Earthman, said the old man. If you would care to discover what happened 7.5 million years later on the great day of the answer, Allow me to invite you to my study where you can experience the events yourself on our senso tape records. That unless you would like to take a quick stroll on the surface of New Earth, it's only half completed, I'm afraid. We haven't even finished burying the artificial dinosaur skeletons in the crust yet. Then we have the tertiary and quaternary periods of the Cenozoic era to lay down, and no, thank you, said Arthur. It wouldn't be quite the same. No, said Thunderbird fast. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be. He'd turn the air car around and head back toward the mind-numbing wall. Chapter 27. Slaughterbutt-Fest's study was a total mess, like the results of an explosion in a public library. The old man frowned as they stepped in. Terribly unfortunate, he said. A diode blew in one of the life support computers. When we tried to revive our cleaning staff, we discovered they'd been dead for nearly 30,000 years. Who's going to clear away the bodies? That's what I want to know. Look, why don't you sit yourself down over there and let me plug you in? He gestured Arthur towards a chair which looked as if it had been made out of the rib cage of a stegosaurus. It was made out of the rib cage of a stegosaurus, explained the old man, as he pottered about fishing bits of wire out from under tottering piles of paper and drawing instruments. Here, he said, hold these, and passed a couple of stripped wire ends to Arthur. The instant he took hold of them, a bird flew straight through him. He was suspended in mid-air and totally invisible to himself. Beneath him was a pretty tree-lined city square, and all around it, as far as the eye could see, were white concrete buildings of airy, spacious design, but somewhat the worse for wear. Many were cracked and stained with rain. Today, however, the sun was shining, a fresh breeze danced slightly through the trees, and the odd sensation that all the buildings were quietly humming was probably caused by the fact that the square and all the streets around were thronged with cheerful, excited people. Somewhere a band was playing, brightly colored flags were fluttering in the breeze, and the spirit of carnival was in the air. Arthur felt extraordinarily lonely stuck up in the air above it all, without so much as a body to his name. But before he had time to reflect on this, a voice rang out across the square and caught for everyone's attention. A man standing on a brightly dressed die for the building which clearly dominated the square was dressed in the crowd over a tannoy. "Oh, people who wait in the shadow of deep thought," he cried out. "Honored descendants of Rune Fondel and Magic Thieves, the greatest and most truly interesting pundits the universe has ever known, the time of waiting is over." Wild cheers broke out among the crowd. Flags, streamers, and wolf whistles sailed through the air. The narrower streets looked rather like centipedes rolled over on their backs and frantically waving their legs in the air. 7.5 million years our race has waited for this great and hopefully enlightening day, cried the cheerleader. The day of the answer. Hurrahs burst from the ecstatic crowd. Never again, cried the man. Never again will we wake up in the morning and think, who am I? What is my purpose in life? Does it really, cosmically speaking, matter if I don't get up and go to work? Today we will finally learn, once and for all, the plain and simple answer to all these nagging little problems of life, the universe, and everything. As the crowd erupted once again, Arthur found himself gliding through the air and down toward one of the large stately windows on the first floor, the building behind the dais from which the speaker was addressing the crowd. Sorry, I was trying to respond to the thing I got. He experienced a moment's panic as he sailed straight toward the window, which passed when a second or so later he found he had gone right through the solid glass without apparently touching it. No one in the room remarked on his peculiar arrival, which is hardly surprising as he wasn't there. He began to realize that the whole experience was merely a recorded projection, which knocked six-track 70mm into a cocked hat. The room was much as Slaughterbutt-Fest described it. In 7.5 million years, it had been well looked after and cleaned regularly every century or so. The ultra mahogany desk was worn at the edges, the carpet a little faded now, but the large computer terminal sat in sparkling glory on the desk's leather top, as bright as if it had been constructed yesterday. Thank you for that bat and the drink blood and the stretch. Yay, bats! Yippee! Ah, yes, and you see, when you make me drink blood, my window fogs up. You fog up my window. How did you fogged up my screen? My screen, you fucked it up. Thank you. If I could get my book to stop falling off the desk. Welcome in, Bean. Thank you. Hope your PT went well. I drink some water. I take a sip. I drink some of that blood. My nose is stuffed. They were blowing out pollen and sawdust and stuff, and it kind of blew towards me, so it all went up my nose. I think I'm not happy about it. My nose is gonna be stuffed up. Oh, stretch. I gotta do a stretch. My bad. I forgot about the stretch. Oh, oh, stretchy stretch. Thank you. So I don't know if I'm gonna finish this book today or not. I thought I was, but I might not be able to finish it tonight, which makes me sad, as I was hoping to, yeah, but apparently not. Boo. Anyway, back to the book. Where was I? Ugh. The time is nearly upon us, said one, and Arthur was surprised to see a word suddenly materialize in thin air just by the man's neck. The word was Loonqual. It flashed a couple times and then disappeared again. Before Arthur was able to assimilate this, the other man spoke, and the word Fooch appeared by his neck. 75,000 generations ago, our ancestors set this program in motion, the second man said. And in all that time, we'll be the first to hear the computer speak. An awesome prospect, Fooch, agreed the first man, and Arthur suddenly realized he was watching a recording with subtitles. We're the ones who are here, said Fooch. The answer to the great question of life, the universe, said Lunqual, and everything. Shh, said Lunqual with a slight gesture. I think Deep Thought is preparing to speak. There was a moment's expectant pause while panels slowly came to life on the front of the console. Lights flashed on and off experimentally and settled down into a businesslike pattern. A soft, low hum came from the communication channel. Good morning, said Deep Thought at last. Good morning, O Deep Thought, said Loon Qual nervously. Do you have, that is, an answer for you? Interrupted Deep Thought majestically. Yes, I have. The two men shivered with expectancy. Their waiting had not been in vain. There really is one? Breathed Fuj. There really is one, confirmed Deep Thought. To everything? To the great question of life, the universe, and everything? Yes. Both of the men had been trained for this moment, their lives had been a preparation for it, and they had been selected at birth as those who would witness the answer. But even so, they found themselves gasping and squirming like excited children. And you're ready to give it to us? Urged Lunqual. I am. Now? Now, said Deep Thought. They both licked their dry lips. Though I don't think, added Deep Thought, that you're going to like it. Doesn't matter, said Fujik. We must know it now. Now? Inquired Deep Thought. Yes, now. All right, said the computer and settled into silence again. The two men fidgeted. The tension was unbearable. You're really not going to like it, observed Deep Thought. Tell us. All right, said Deep Thought. The answer to the great question. Yes? Of life, the universe, and everything, said Deep Thought. Yes? Is, said Deep Thought, and paused. Yes? Is, yes? 42, said Deep Thought with infinite majesty and calm. That's right, everyone. The answer to life and everything as we know it is 42. You are welcome. That's all you need to know. There you go. It's 42. You don't need any other answers. You don't need anything else for your math test or anything else. You just need to know 42 is the answer. It was a long time before anyone spoke. Out of the corner of his eye, Fooch could see the sea of tense, expectant faces down in the square outside. "We're going to get lynched, aren't we?" he whispered. "It was a tough assignment," said Deep Thought mildly. 42? yelled Loonquall. "Is that all you've got to show for 7.5 million years of work?" "I checked it very thoroughly," said the computer, "and that quite definitely is the answer. I think the problem, to be quite honest with you, is that you've actually never known what the question is." "But it was the great question, the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything," howled Loonquall. "Yes," said Deep Thought with the air of one who suffers fools gladly. "But what actually is it?" A slow, stupefied silence crept over the men as they stared at the computer and then at each other. "Well, it's just everything. e- Everything," offered Fuchs weakly. "Exactly," said Deep Thought. "So once you do know what the question actually is, you'll know what the answer means." "Oh, terrific," muttered Fuchs, flinging aside his notebook and wiping away a tiny tear. "Look, all right," said Moonquall. "Can you just please tell us the question? The ultimate question?" "Yes." "Of life, the universe, and everything?" "Yes." Deep Thought pondered for a moment. "Tricky," he said. "But can you do it?" cried Loonquall. Deep Thought pondered this for another long moment. Finally, "No," he said firmly. Both men collapsed onto their chairs in despair. "But I'll tell you who can," said Deep Thought. They both looked up sharply. "Who? Tell us!" Suddenly Arthur began to feel his apparently non-existent scalp begin to crawl as he found himself moving slowly but inexorably forward toward the console. But it was only a dramatic zoom on the part of whoever had made the recording, he zoomed. "I speak of none but the computer that is to come after me," intoned Deep Thought, his voice regaining its accustomed declamatory tones. "A computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, and yet I will design it for you. A computer that can calculate the question to the ultimate answer. A computer of such infinite and subtle complexity the organic life itself shall form part of its operational matrix. And you yourselves shall take on new forms and go down into the computer to navigate its 10 million year program. Yes, I shall design this computer for you, and I shall name it also unto you, and it shall be called the Earth." Which gave that deep thought. "What a dull name," he said, and great incisions appeared down the length of his body. Lunqual, too, suddenly sustained horrific gashes from nowhere. The computer console blotched and cracked, the walls flickered and crumpled, and the room crashed upward into the ceiling. Slutterbot Fast was standing in front of Arthur holding the two wires. "End of the tape," he explained. Chapter 29. Zaphod, wake up! Hey, come on, wake up. "Just let me stick to what I'm good at, yeah?" he muttered. Zaphod rolled away from the voice back to sleep. "Do you want me to kick you?" said Ford. "Would it give you a lot of pleasure?" said Zaphod blearily. "No, nor me, so what's the point? Stop bugging me." Zaphod curled himself up. "Ugh." "He got a double dose of that gas," said Trillian, looking down at him. "Two windpipes." "And stop talking," said Zaphod. "It's hard enough trying to sleep anyway. What's the matter with the ground? It's all cold and hard." "It's gold," said Ford. With an amazingly balletic movement, Zaphod was standing and scanning the horizon, because that was how far the gold ground stretched. In every direction, perfectly smooth and solid, it gleamed like it's impossible to say what it gleamed like, because nothing in the universe gleams in quite the same way that a planet made of solid gold does. "Who put all that there?" yelped Zaphod, goggle-eyed. "Don't get excited," said Ford. "It's only a catalog." "A who?" "A catalog," said Trillian, "an illusion." How can you say that? Cried Zaphod, falling to his hands and knees and staring at the ground. He poked it and prodded it. It was very heavy and very slightly soft. He could mark it with his fingernail. It was very yellow and very shiny. When he breathed on it, his breath evaporated off in that very peculiar and special way that breath evaporates off solid gold. Trilly and I came round a while ago, said Ford. We shouted and yelled till somebody came, then carried on shouting and yelling till they got fed up and put us in their plant catalog to keep us busy till they were ready to deal with us. This is all sensotape. Ah, Zaphod stared at him bitterly. Ah, shit, he said. You wake me up from my own perfectly good dream to show me somebody else's. He sat down in a huff. Ah, my nose. Return shade. Sorry about that. Sorry, Vignan. Thank you. Ugh. Oh, great. YouTube Studio is acting when I have to plug this in. No, I'm good. There we go. Should fix it. Hmm. What's that series of valley over there? He said. Palmer, said Ford. We had a look. We didn't wake you earlier, said Trillian. The last plant was knee-deep in fish. Fish? Some people like the oddest things. And before that, said Ford, we had platinum. Bit dull. We thought you'd like to see this one, though. Seas of light glared at them in one solid blaze wherever they looked. Very pretty, said Zaphod petulantly. In the sky, a huge green catalog number appeared. It flickered and changed when they looked around again, so had the land. As with one voice, they all went, yuck. The sea was purple. The beach they were on was composed of tiny yellow and green pebbles, presumably terribly precious stones. The mountains in the distance seemed soft and undulating with red peaks. Nearby stood a solid silver beach table with a frilly mauve parasol and silver tassels. In the sky, a huge sign appeared, replacing the catalog number. It said, "Whatever your tastes, Magrathea can cater for you. We are not proud." And 500 entirely naked women dropped out of the sky in parachutes. In a moment, the scene vanished and left them in a springtime meadow full of cows. "Ow!" said Zaphod. "My brains!" "You want to talk about it?" said Ford. "Yeah, okay," said Zaphod, and all three sat down and ignored the scenes that came and went around them. "I figure this," said Zaphod. "Whatever happened in my mind, I did it, and I did it in such a way that it wouldn't be detected by the government screening tests. I wasn't knowing anything about myself. Pretty crazy, right?" The other two nodded in agreement. "So I reckon. What's so secret that I can't let anybody know it? Not the galactic government, not even myself." And the answer is, I don't know. Obviously, but I put a few things together, and so I can begin to guess. When did I decide to run for president? Shortly after the death of President Woodin Vranks. You remember Woodin Ford? Yeah, he was that. He said Ford. He was that guy we met when we were kids. The Arcturian captain. He was a gas. He gave us conkers when you bust your way into his mega freighter. Said you were the most amazing kid he'd ever met. What's all this? Said Trillian. Ancient history, said Ford. When we were kids together on Beetlejuice, the Arcturian megafreighters used to carry most of the bulky trade between the galactic center and the outlying regions. The Beetlejuice trading scouts used to find the markets, and the Arcturians would supply them. There was a lot of trouble with space pirates before they were wiped out in the Daedalus Wars, and the mega freighters had to be equipped with the most fantastic defense shields known to galactic science. They were real brutes of ships, and huge. In orbit around a planet, they would eclipse the sun. One day, young Zaphod here decides to raid one on a tree-jet scooter designed for stratosphere work. A mere kid. I mean, forget it. It was crazier than a mad monkey. I went along for the ride because I got some very safe money on him not doing it, and didn't want him coming back with fake evidence. So what happens? We get in his tri-jet, which he'd souped up into something totally other, cross 3 parsecs in a matter of weeks, bust our way into the mega freighter, I still don't know how, marched onto the bridge, waving toy pistols, and demanded conkers. A wilder thing I have not known lost me a year's pocket money. For what? Conkers. The captain was this really amazing guy. Yuden Vrons, said Zaphod. He gave us food, booze, stuff from really weird parts of the galaxy, lots of conkers, of course, and we had just the most incredible time. Then he teleported us back into the maximum security wing of the Beetlejuice State Prison. He was a cool guy. Went on to become the president of the galaxy. Zaphod paused. The scene around them was currently plunged into gloom. Dark mist swirled around them, and elephantine shapes looked indistinctly in the shadows. The air was occasionally rent with the sounds of illusory beings murdering other illusory beings. Presumably, enough people must have liked this sort of thing to make it a paying proposition. "Ford," said Zaphod quietly. "Yeah?" I could just flip the page. The page! Nope, that's a good thing. "Just before Yuden died, he came to see me." "What? You never told me." "No." "What did he say? What did he come to see you about?" "He told me about the heart of gold. It was his idea that I should steal it." "His idea?" "Yeah," said Zaphod, "and the only possible way of stealing it was to be at the launching ceremony." Ford gaped at him in astonishment for a moment, then roared with laughter. "Are you telling me," he said, "that you set yourself up to become president of the galaxy just to steal that ship?" "That's it," said Zaphod, with the sort of grin that would get most people locked away in a room with soft walls. "But why?" said Ford. "What's so important about having it?" "Dunno," said Zaphod. "I think if I'd consciously known what was so important about it and what I would need for it, would have showed up on the brain screening test and I would have never passed. I think you'd told me a lot of things that are still locked away." So you think you went and mucked about inside your own brain as a result of Yuden talking to you? He was a hell of a talker. Yeah, but Zaphod, old mate, you want to look after yourself, you know. Zaphod shrugged. I mean, don't you have any inkling of the reasons for all this? Asked Ford. Zaphod thought hard about this, and doubt seemed to cross his mind. No, he said at last, I don't seem to be letting myself into any of my secrets. Still, he added on further reflection, I can understand that. I won't trust myself further than I could spit a rat. A moment later, the last plant in the catalog vanished from beneath them, and the solid world resolved itself again. They were sitting in a plush waiting room full of glass-topped tables and design awards. A tall Magrathian man was standing in front of them. The mice will see you now. Chapter 30. So there you have it, said Slurpifast, making a feeble and perfunctory attempt to clear away some of the appalling mess of his study. He picked up a piece of paper from the top of a pile, but then couldn't think of anywhere else to put, so he put it back on top of the original pile, which promptly fell over. Deep thought designed the earth, we built it, and you lived on it. And the Vogans came and destroyed it 5 minutes before the program was completed, added Arthur. Not unbearably. Yes, said the old man, pausing to gaze hopelessly around the room. 10 million years of planning and work gone just like that. 10 million years. Earthmen, can you conceive of that kind of time span? A galactic civilization could grow from a single worm 5 times over in that time. Gone. He paused. Well, that's bureaucracy for you, he added. You know, said Arthur thoughtfully, all this explains a lot of things. All through my life I've had this strange, unaccountable feeling that something was going on in the world. Something big, even sinister, and no one would tell me what it was. No, said the old man. That's just perfectly normal paranoia. Everyone in the universe has that. Everyone, said Arthur. Well, if everyone has it, perhaps it means something. Perhaps somewhere outside the universe we know. Maybe. Who cares? Said Starterfest before Arthur got too excited. Perhaps I'm old and tired, he continued, but I always think that the chances of finding out what really is going on are so absurdly remote that the only thing to do is to say, hang the sense of it and just keep yourself occupied. Look at me. I design coastlines. I got a reward for Norway. He rummaged around in a pile of debris and put out a large plexiglass block with his name on it and a model of Norway molded onto it. Where's the sense in that? He said. None that I've been able to make out. I've been doing Fords all my life. For a fleeting moment, they become fashionable, and I get a major reward. He turned over his hands, but shrugged and tossed aside carelessly, but not so carelessly that it didn't land on something soft. In this replacement Earth we're building, they've given me Africa to do, and of course I'm doing it with all Fords again because I happen to like them and old fashioned enough to think that they give a lovely Baroque feel to a continent. And they tell me it's not equatorial enough. Equatorial? He gave a hollow laugh. What does it matter? Science has achieved some wonderful things, of course, but I'd far rather be happy than right any day. Hello, hiya Mia. Welcome in, Miwa. How you doing? Hope you're doing well, and yeah. Welcome, welcome. Let's see. And are you? No, that's where it all falls down, of course. Pity, said Arthur with sympathy. It sounded like quite a good lifestyle otherwise. Somewhere on the wall a small white light flashed. You're all right, just bored? I'm sorry you're bored. Hopefully this can be mildly, at least a little entertaining for you. I might be going back to games here soon. Yeah, maybe. Probably, actually. Where's okay? Come, said Starterfast. You are to meet the mice. Your arrival on the planet has caused considerable excitement. It has already been hailed, so I gather, as the third most improbable event in the history of the universe. What were the first two? Posture check? Thanks. Wait. Sit up as best as I can. I am not sure. I can't play any of my PS4 games because the cord for my external hard drive died, and I have to get a new one. So those are out. I'm not quite sure. I might do Spyro. I still need to finish that game up. No, it'd probably be Spyro. We might do that tomorrow. Maybe. I don't know, I was thinking about maybe taking a week-long break from games, but I don't think it hasn't been that long. So I'm not sure, but I think I might return to gaming tomorrow. Okay, enjoy your repo, and yeah. Yeah, I think I will do Spyro tomorrow. We'll get back to it. Maybe with that, like one of my childhood games. That should hopefully be fun. So what were the first two? Oh, probably just coincidences, said Starbuck Fest carelessly. He opened the door and stood waiting for Arthur to follow. It is. Arthur glanced around him once more and then down at himself well, I don't think it's old. I think old is like definitely older than that. Arthur glanced around him once more and then down at himself at the sweaty, disheveled clothes he had been lying in the mud in on Thursday morning. I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, he muttered to himself. I beg your pardon, asked the old man mildly. Oh, nothing, said Arthur. Only joking. Chapter 31. And we're slowly getting through the book. It is, of course, well known that careless talk costs life, but the full scale of the problem is not always appreciated. For instance, at the very moment that Arthur said, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, a freak wormhole opened up in the fabric of the space time continuum and carried his words far, far back in time across almost infinite reaches of space to a distant galaxy where strange and warlike beings were poised on the brink of frightful interstellar battle. The two opposing leaders were meeting for the last time. A dreadful silence fell across the conference table as the commander of the Vlurgs, resplendent in his black jeweled battle shorts, gazed lividly at the Gagoonvunt leader squatting opposite him in a cloud of green, sweet-smelling steam, and with a million sleek and horribly beweaponed star cruisers poised to unleash electric death at his single word of command. Challenged the vile creature to take back what it said about his mother. The creature stirred in his sickly, broiling vapor, and at that very moment the words, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, drifted across the conference table. Unfortunately, in the Vlurg tongue, this was the most dreadful insult imaginable, and there was nothing for it but to wage a terrible war for centuries. Eventually, of course, after their galaxy had been decimated over a few thousand years, it was realized that the whole thing had been a ghastly mistake, and so the two opposing battle fleets settled their few remaining differences in order to launch a joint attack on our own galaxy, now positively identified as the source of the offending remark. For thousands more years, the mighty ships tore across the empty waste of space, and finally dived screaming onto the first planet they came across, which happened to be the Earth, where due to a terrible miscalculation of scale, the entire battle fleet was accidentally swallowed by a small dog. Those who study the complex interplay of cause and effect in the history of the universe say that this sort of thing is going on all the time, but that we are powerless to prevent it. It's just life, they say. A short aircar trip brought Arthur and the old Magrathian to a doorway. They left the car and went through the door into a waiting room full of glass-topped tables and plexiglass boards. Almost immediately, a light flashed above the door and at the other side of the room, and they entered. Arthur, you're safe! A voice cried. Am I? Said Arthur, rather startled. Oh, good. The lighting was rather subdued, and it took him a moment or so to see Ford, Trillian, and Zaphod sitting round a large table beautifully decked out with exotic dishes, strange sweetmeats, and bizarre fruits. They were stuffing their faces. What happened to you? Demanded Arthur. Well, said Zaphod, attacking a bone full of grilled muscle. Our guests here have been gassing us and zapping our minds and being generally weird, and have now given us a rather nice meal to make it up for us. Here, he said, hoiking out a lump of evil-smelling meat from a bowl. Have some vegan rhino's cutlet. It's delicious if you happen to like that sort of thing. Hosts? What hosts? I don't see any. A small voice said, Welcome to lunch, Earth creature. Arthur glanced around and suddenly yelped, Ugh, he said. There are mice on the table. There was an awkward silence as everyone looked pointedly at Arthur, who was busy staring at the two white mice sitting in what looked like whiskey glasses on the table. He heard the silence and glanced around at everyone. Oh, he said with sudden realization. I'm sorry, I wasn't quite prepared for. Let me introduce you, said Trillian. Arthur, this is Benji Mouse. Hi, said one of the mice. His whiskers stroked what must have been a touch-sensitive panel on the inside of the whiskey glass-like affair. It moved forward slightly. And this is Frankie Mouse. The other mouse said, Pleased to meet you, and did likewise. Arthur gaped, but aren't they? Yes, said Trillian. They are the mice I brought with me from the Earth. He looked him in the eye, and Arthur thought he detected the tiniest resigned shrug. Could you pass me that bowl of grated Arturian megadonkey? She said. Clutterbutt coughed politely. Excuse me, he said. Yes, thank you, Slutterbutt, said Benjamin sharply. You may go. What? Oh, very well, said the old man, slightly taken aback. I'll just go on and get on with some of my forts then. Ah, well, in fact, that won't be necessary, said Frankie Mouse. It looks very much as if we won't be needing the new Earth any longer. He swiveled his pink little eyes. No, not now that we have found a native of the planet who was there seconds before it was destroyed. What? Cried Slaughterfest, aghast. You can't mean that. I've got 1,000 glaciers poisoned ready to roll over Africa. Well, perhaps you can take a quick skiing holiday if we dismantle them, said Frankie acidly. Skiing holiday, cried the old man. Those glaciers are works of art, elegantly sculpted contours, soaring pinnacles of ice, deep, majestic ravines. Be sacrilege to go skiing on high art. Thank you, Slaughterfest, said Benji firmly. That will be all. Yes, sir, said the old man coldly. Thank you very much. Well, goodbye, Earthman, he said. Earthman, he said to Arthur. Hope the lifestyle comes together. With a brief nod to the rest of the company, he turned and walked sadly out the room. Arthur stared after him, not knowing what to say. No, said Benjamin. To business. Ford and Zaphod clinked their glasses together. To business, they said. Beg your pardon, said Benji. Ford looked around. Sorry, I thought you were proposing a toast, he said. The two mice sculled impatiently around in their glass transports. Finally, they composed themselves, and Benji moved forward to address Arthur. Now, Earth creature, he said, the situation we have in effect is this. We have, as you know, been more or less running your planet for the last 10 million years in order to find this wretched thing called the question to the ultimate answer. Why, said Arthur sharply. No, we already thought of that one, said Frankie, interrupting. But it doesn't fit the answer. Why 42? You see, it doesn't work. No, said Arthur. I mean, why have you been doing it? Oh, I see, said Frankie. Well, eventually just habit, I think. To be brutally honest, and this is more or less the point, we're sick to the teeth with the whole thing, and the prospect of doing it all over again on account of those wind-ridden Vulcans quite frankly gives me the screaming heebie-jeebies. You know what I mean. It was by the merest lucky chance that Benji and I finished our particular job and left the planet early for a quick holiday, and have since manipulated our way back to Magathea by the good offices of your friends. Magathea is a gateway back to our own dimension, put in Benji. Since then, continued his marine colleague, We have had an offer of a quite enormously fat contract to do the 5D chat show and lecture circuit back in our own dimensional neck of the woods, and we're very much inclined to take it. I would, wouldn't you, Ford? Said Zaphod promptly. Oh, yes, said Ford. Jump at it like a shot. Arthur glanced at them, wondering what all this was leading up to. But we've got to have product, you see, said Frankie. I mean, ideally, we still need the question to the ultimate answer in some form or other. Zaphod leaned forward to Arthur. You see, he said, if they're just sitting there in the studio looking very relaxed and, just mentioning that they happen to know the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and then eventually have to admit that, in fact, it's 42, then the show's probably quite short. No follow up, you see. We have to have something that sounds good, said Benji. Something that sounds good, exclaimed Arthur. A question to the ultimate answer that sounds good. From a couple of mice. Mice bristled. Well, I mean, yes, idealism, yes, the dignity of pure research, yes, the pursuit of truth in all its forms. But there comes a point, I'm afraid, where you begin to suspect if there's any real truth. It's the entire multidimensional infinity of the universe is almost certainly being run by a bunch of maniacs. If it comes to the choice between spending yet another 10 million years finding that out, and on the other hand, just taking the money and running, that I, for one, could do with the exercise, said Frankie. But said Arthur hopelessly. Hey, will you get this, Earthman? Interrupted Zaphod. You are a last generation product of that computer matrix, right? And you were there right up to the moment your plant got the finger, yeah? Er. So your brain was an organic part of the penultimate configuration of the computer program, said Ford, rather lucidly, he thought. Right, said Zaphod. Well, said Arthur doubtfully. He wasn't aware of ever having felt an organic part anything. He had always seen this as one of his problems. In other words, said Benji, steering his curious little vehicle right over Arthur, there's a good chance that the structure of the question is encoded in the structure of your brain, so we want to buy it off you. What, the question? Said Arthur. Yes, said Ford and Trillian. For lots of money, said Zaphod. No, no, said Frankie. It's the brain we want to buy. What? Well, who would missing? Inquired Benji. I thought you said you would just read his brain electronically, protested Ford. Oh, yes, said Frankie, but we'd have to get it out first. It's got to be prepared. Treated, said Benji. Diced. Thank you, shouted Arthur, tipping up his chair and backing away from the table in horror. It can always be replaced, said Benji reasonably, if you think it's important. Yes, an electronic brain, said Frankie. A simple one would suffice. Yeah, said Zaphod with a sullen evil grin. You just have to program it to say, what? And I don't understand, and where's the T? Who'd know the difference? What? Cried Arthur, backing away still further. See what I mean? Said Zaphod, and howled with pain because of something that Trillian did at that moment. I'd notice the difference, said Arthur. No, you wouldn't, said Frankie Mouse, and you'd be programmed not to. Ford made for the door. Look, I'm sorry, mice old lads, he said. I don't think we've got a deal. I rather think we have to have a deal, said the mice in chorus. All the charm vanished from their piping little voices in an instant. With a tiny whining shriek, the two glass transports lifted themselves off the table and swung through the air toward Arthur, who stumbled farther backward into a blind corner, utterly unable to cope or think of anything. Trillian grabbed him desperately by the arm and tried to drag him toward the door, which Ford and Zaphod were struggling to open, but Arthur was dead right. He seemed hypnotized by the airborne rodent swooping toward him. She screamed at him, but he just gaped. With one more yank, Ford and Zaphod got the door open. On the other side of it was a small pack of rather ugly men who could they only assume were the heavy mob of Magrathea. Not only were they ugly themselves, but the medical they equipment they carried with them was also far from pretty. They charged. So Arthur was about to have his head cut open. Trillian was unable to help him, and Ford and Zaphod were about to be set upon by several thugs a great deal heavier and more sharply armed than they were. All in all, it was extremely fortunate at that moment every alarm on the planet burst into an ear-splitting din. Emergency! Emergency! Blared the klaxons throughout Magathia. Hostile ship has landed on planet. Armed intruders in Section 8A. Defense stations! Defense stations! The two mice sniffed irritably around the fragments of their glass transports where they lay shattered on the floor. Damnation! Muttered Frankie Mouse. All that fuss over 2 pounds of earthling brain. He scuttled round and about, his pink eyes flashing, his fine white coat bristling with static. The only thing we can do now, said Benji, crouching and stroking his whiskers in thought, is to try and fake a question, invent one that will sound plausible. Difficult, said Frankie. He thought for a moment. How about what's yellow and dangerous? Benji considered this for a moment. No, no good, he said. Doesn't fit the answer. They sank into silence for a few seconds. All right, said Benji. What do you get if you multiply 6 by 7? No, no, too literal, too factual, said Frankie, which sustained the punter's interest. Again they thought. Then Frankie said, Here's a thought. How many roads must a man walk down? Ah, said Benji. Aha, now that does sound promising. He rolled the phrase around a little. Yes, he said. That's excellent. Sounds very significant without actually tying you down to mean anything at all. How many roads must a man walk down? 42. Excellent, excellent. Now, Foxum, Frankie, baby, we are made. They performed a scampering dance in their excitement. Near them on the floor lay several rather ugly men who had been hit about the head with some heavy design awards. Half a mile away, four figures pounded up a corridor looking for a way out. They emerged into a wide-open planned computer bay. They glanced about wildly. Which way you reckon, Zaphod? Said Ford. A wild guess, I said down here, said Zaphod, running off down to the right between a computer bank and the wall. As the others started after him, he was brought up short by a kilo zap energy bolt that cracked through the air inches in front of him, from a small section of adjacent wall. A voice on a bullhead said, Okay, Beeble Brox, hold it right there. We've got you covered. Pops! His Zaphod spun around a crouch. You want to try guess it all, Ford? Okay, this way, said Ford. The other four of them ran down a gangway between two computer banks. At the end of a gangway appeared a heavily armored and space-suited figure waving a vicious kilozap gun. We don't want to shoot you, Beeble Brox, shouted the figure. Suits me fine, shouted Zaphod back and dived down a wide gap between two data process units. The others swerved in behind them. There are two of them, said Trillian. We're cornered. They squeezed themselves down in an angle between a large computer databank and the wall. They held their breath and waited. Suddenly, the air exploded with energy bolts as both the cops opened fire on them simultaneously. Hey, they're shooting at us, said Arthur, crouching in a tight ball. I thought they said they didn't want to do that. Yeah, I thought they said that. Ugh. Where is it? Zaphod stuck a head up for a dangerous moment. Hey, he said, I thought you said you didn't want to shoot us, said, and ducked again. They waited. After a moment, a voice replied, It isn't easy being a cop. What did he say? Whispered Ford in astonishment. He said it isn't easy being a cop. Well, surely that's his problem, isn't it? I'd have thought so. Ford shouted out, Hey, listen! I think we got enough problems of our own having you shooting at us. So if you could avoid laying your problems on us as well, I think we'd all find it easier to cope. Another pause, and then the bullhorn again. Now see here, guy, said the voice. You're not dealing with any dumb two-bit trigger pumping morons with low handlines, little piggy eyes, and no conversation. We're a couple intelligent, caring guys you'd probably quite like if you met us socially. I don't go around gratuitously shooting people and bragging about it afterward at a Space Rangers bars, like some cops I could mention. I go around shooting people gratuitously, and then I agonize about it afterward for hours to my girlfriend. And I write novels, chummed the other cop, though I haven't had any of them published yet, so I better warn you, I'm in a mean mood. Ford's eyes popped halfway out of their sockets. Who are these guys? He said. Don't know, said Zaphod. I think I preferred it when they were shooting. So you go come quietly, shouted one of the cops again, or you go let us blast you out. Which would you prefer? Shouted Ford. A millisecond later, the air about them started to fry again as bolt after bolt of Kilozap hurled itself into the computer bank in front of them. The full assault continued for 7 seconds at unbearable intensity. When it stopped, there were a few seconds of near quietness as the echoes died away. You still there? Called one of the cops. Yes, they called back. We didn't enjoy doing that at all, shouted the other cop. We could tell, shouted Ford. Now listen to this, people rocks, and you better listen good. Why? Shouted back Zaphod. Because, shouted the cop, it's going to be very intelligent and quite interesting and humane. Now, either you all give yourselves up now and let us beat you up a bit, well, not very much, of course, because we are firmly opposed to any of this violence, or we blow up this entire plant and possibly one or two others we noticed on our way here. But that's crazy, cried Trillian. You wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, we would, shouted the cop. Wouldn't we? He asked the other one. Oh, yes, we'd have to. No question, the other one called back. But why? Demanded Trillian. Because there are some things you have to do even if you are an enlightened liberal cop who knows all about sensitivity and everything. I just don't believe these guys, murmured Ford, shaking his head. One cop shouts to the other. Shall we shoot them again for a bit? Yeah. Why not? They let fly another electric barrage. The heat and the noise was quite fantastic. Slowly the computer bank was beginning to disintegrate. The front had almost all melted away in thick rivulets of molten metal, winding their way back toward where they were squatting. They huddled farther back and waited for the end. Hold on one sec. I'll check something. Oh. Oh, wow, I really am actually at the end. Okay, perfect. But the end never came, at least not then. Quite suddenly, the barrage stopped, and the sudden silence afterward was punctuated by a couple of strangled gurgles and thuds. The four stared at each other. What happened? Said Arthur. They stopped, said Zaphod with a shrug. Why? Don't know. Do you want to go and ask them? No. They waited. Hello? Called out Ford. No answer. That's odd. Perhaps it's a trap. They haven't the wit. What were those thuds? Don't know. They waited for a few more seconds. Right, said Ford. I'm going to have a look. He glanced around at the others. Is no one going to say, no, you can't possibly. Let me go instead? They all shook their heads. Oh well, he said and stood up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, after a second or so, nothing continued to happen. Ford peered through the thick smoke that was billowing out of the burning computer. Cautiously, he stepped out into the open. Still nothing happened. 20 yards away, he could dimly see through the smoke and spacesuit figure of one of the cops. He was lying in a crumpled heap on the ground. 20 yards in the other direction lay the second man. No one else was anywhere to be seen. This struck Ford as being extremely odd. Slowly, nervously, he walked toward the first one. The body lay reassuringly still as he approached it, and continued to lie reassuringly still as he reached it and put his foot down on the Kilozap gun that still dangled from its limp fingers. He reached down and picked it up, meeting no resistance. The cop was quite clearly dead. A quick examination revealed to him to be from Blagulon Kappa. He was a methane-breathing life form dependent on his spacesuit for survival in the thin oxygen atmosphere of Magrathea. The tiny life support system computer on his backpack appeared unexpectedly to have blown up. Ford poked around in it in considerable astonishment. These miniature suit computers usually had the full backup of the main computer back on the ship, with which they were directly linked through sub-ether. Such a system was fail-safe in all circumstances other than total feedback malfunction, which was unheard of. He hurried over to the prone figure and discovered that exactly the same impossible thing had happened to him. Presumably simultaneously. He called the others over to look. They came, shared his astonishment, but not his curiosity. Let's get shot of this hole, said Zaphod. If whatever I'm supposed to be looking for is here, I don't want it. He grabbed the second killer zap gun, blasted a perfectly harmless accounting computer, and rushed out into the corridor, followed by the others. He very nearly blasted the hell out of an air car that stood waiting for them a few yards away. The air car was empty, but Arthur recognized it as belonging to Slaughterbuckfast. He had a note from him pinned to the part of its sparse instrument panel. The note had an arrow drawn at pointing at one of the controls. It said, "This is probably the best button to press." Chapter 34. The air car rocketed them at speeds in excess of R-17 through steel tunnels that led out to a falling surface of the planet. Hold on, I gotta blow my nose again. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. The air car rocketed them at speeds in excess of R-17 through the steel tunnels that led out onto the appalling surface of the planet, which was now in the grip of yet another drear morning. Twilight. Ghastly gray light congealed on the land. R is a velocity measure defined as a reasonable speed of travel that is consistent with health, mental well-being, and not being more than, say, 5 minutes late. It is therefore clearly an almost infinitely variable figure according to circumstances, since the first two factors vary not only with speed taken as an absolute, but also with awareness of the third factor. Unless handled with tranquility, this equation can result in considerable stress, ulcers, and even death. R-17 is not a fixed velocity, but it is clearly far too fast. The air car flung itself through the air at R-17 and above, deposited them next to the herd of gold which stood starkly on the frozen ground, like a bleached bone, and then precipitately hurled itself back in the direction whence they had come, presumably on important business of its own. Shivering, shivering, the four of them stood and looked at the ship. Beside it stood another one. It was the Blagolin copper police craft, a bulbous shark-like affair, slate green in color and smothered with black stenciled letters of varying degrees of size and unfriendliness. The letters informed anyone who cared to read them as to where the ship was from, what section of the police it was assigned to, and where the power feed should be connected. Ah, my window! You fucked up my screen! Yeah. Thank you for the house plant. Oh, I gotta do stretch. I gotta do stretch. All right, give me one sec. Give me one sec. Oop, not my chords. Stretch. Ooh, stretch. It seemed somehow unnaturally. Thank you for the houseplant bean. It seemed somehow unnaturally dark and silent, even for a ship whose two-man crew was at the moment laying asphyxiated in a smoke-filled chamber several miles beneath the ground. It is one of those curious things that is impossible to explain or define, but one can sense when a ship is completely dead. Ford could sense it and found it most mysterious. A ship and two policemen seemed to have gone spontaneously dead. In his experience, the universe simply didn't work like that. The other three could sense it too, but they could sense the bitter cold even more and hurried back into the heart of gold, suffering from an acute attack of no curiosity. Ford stayed and went to examine the Blagalon ship. As he walked, he nearly tripped over an inert steel figure lying face down in the cold dust. "Mervyn!" he exclaimed. "What are you doing?" "Don't feel you have to take any notice of me, please," came a muffled drone. "But how are you, metal man?" said Ford. "Very depressed." "What's up?" "I don't know," said Mervyn. "I've never been there." "Why," said Ford, squatting down beside him, shivering, "are you laying face down in the dust?" "It's a very effective way of being wretched," said Mervyn. "Don't pretend you want to talk to me. I know you hate me." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do. Everybody does. It's part of the shape of the universe. I only have to talk to somebody and they begin to hate me. Even robots hate me. If you just ignore me, I expect I should probably go away." He jacked himself up to his feet and stood resolutely facing the opposite direction. "That ship hated me," he said dejectedly, indicating the police craft. "That ship?" said Ford in sudden excitement. "What happened to it? Do you know?" "It hated me because I talked to it." "You talked to it?" exclaimed Ford. "What do you mean you talked to it?" "Simple. I got very bored and depressed, so I went and plugged myself into its external computer feed. I talked to the computer at great length and explained my view of the universe to it," said Marvin. "And what happened?" pressed Ford. "It committed suicide," said Marvin, and stalked off back to the hurt. Chapter 35. That night, as the Heart of Gold was busy putting a few light years between itself and the Horsehead Nebula, Zaphod lounged under the small palm tree on the bridge, trying to bang his brain into shape with massive pan-galactic gargle blasters. Ford and Trillian sat in a corner discussing life and matters arising from it, and Arthur took to his bed to flip through Ford's copy of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Since he was going to have to live in the place, he reasoned he'd better start finding out something about it. He came across this entry. It said, "The history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through three distinct and recognizable phases. Those of survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where shall we have lunch?" He got no further before the ship's intercom buzzed into life. "Hey, Earthman, you hungry, kid?" said Zaphod's voice. Well, yes, a little peckish, I suppose," said Arthur. "Okay, baby, hold tight," said Zaphod. "We'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe." And that's the end of the first book. Second book is actually called The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. However, we are going to stop here and do that for the next time we start reading. But those will be a little sparsed in and at different times, as I do believe I will start returning to gaming tomorrow. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure. One sec. Yes, so as you heard, returning to gaming might start tomorrow. Not 100% sure, but possibly. So, I mean, who knows, Nia? But yeah, I just want to say thank you all for coming by and hanging out with me. Hope you had a good time. I'm not going to I'm just going to go ahead and end the stream. I will see you all next time. Like I said, possibly tomorrow for gaming. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. But until then, I hope you all have a good rest of your night, good time zone, and I'll see you all later. Bye bye, everyone.